Hi guys, welcome. My name is Cool. In this tutorial, we'll be drawing the figure using a simple stick figure or grid method. The grid isn't exactly the figure itself, it simply relates major landmarks of a figure to each other so we can enjoy building the details on top. I'll be going over this step by step here, but if you need more in-depth info on this, there's a previous video you can check out. I really like to extend this into a series to cover other poses, body types, and for the male counterpart as well. So let me know by a like or comment. I really appreciate knowing if it's worth spending time on. Before we begin, here are some requirements. You should be able to draw clean lines, circles, and simple shapes. You should also be able to extend lines without getting too messy. Some boxes and cylinders will be nice. I will be going over some basic proportions, nothing in details, just enough cheats and hacks to get you going, as well as some basic measuring techniques. If you're struggling with them, I suggest looking up videos specifically for those. On usage, I'd suggest first watching the process, then with the grid system open, do your own version and rewatch sections that troubled you. Try to slow down and use the simplest lines possible and keep yourself clean and tidy. Start with an ellipse for the head, slightly longer than it is wide. Keep it simple. Create a eye or brow line roughly a third of the way down. Connect the side of the ellipse to the pit of the neck. Measure the angle of the shoulder line by holding up your pencil or air tracing it. Try to exaggerate the angle a little bit more than you measure to counter our tendency to straighten or level our drawings. Now, using angles from the head, find the shoulder bumps. You can't really see them here, but it's the last point on the shoulder before it switches to curving downwards. Quick clarification here, we're finding an angle that crosses the shoulder bump that just touches the head or is tangent to it. Now we'll relate the shoulder areas to the pelvis point or the bottom of the torso. First, find the angle. It's pretty much straight down from the pit of the neck. Secondly, we can either triangulate with another angle or use head counts. In this case, it's roughly 3.5 head high. At standing height, we can double our length to get to where the feet are. Now we'll create some grid lines for the torso. First, the center line. Make sure you stick to using simple S-curves, C-curves, and straight lines. Think of it as a game. Do not use more complicated lines when a simpler one would do. And now connect the shoulder bumps to the pelvis point. These are just grid lines. As long as you get the endpoints correct and the curvature somewhat okay, you're fine. It's not an exact science. Next, we want to start developing some landmarks around the pelvis. There are many landmarks to use here. I'll use the bumpy points that we can see at the front. Alternatively, you can use the widest point on the hip. Whichever point you pick doesn't really matter. Just make sure you make an attempt to be symmetric on the opposing side. As you establish more landmarks, you'll have more options to start triangulating the next point. There are no right answers to pick which points to start. As you gain mileage, you'll develop preferences for which landmarks you like to use. Find the first angle from the pelvis point to the hip point. And now triangulate with a second angle. Looks like it's about straight down from the shoulder. Do the same for the right side as well. Periodically clean up the measurement lines, keep it clean and legible. Now connect the neck to the pelvis. Now roughly sketch in circles for the rib cage and the pelvis. Make sure you do plenty of warm-ups of drawing circles beforehand so you don't suffer the way I did here. Next, we'll roughly sketch in the arms. We can triangulate the position of the wrist with angles, but in this case, notice that there's a nice rhythm that connects the two hands and the pelvis point. I roughly sketched in the width of the arm as well, but I double checked it. It's roughly 2/3 of the height of the head. As you define the widths of the arms, gently narrow it towards the wrist. Use simple shape to represent the hands. I tend to use a curved triangle, sort of like a glove. From the shoulder, the distance to the elbows line up with the bottom of the rib cage. We can use another arc to roughly place them. Roughly sketch in the gestures of the legs. We already have the position of the left leg. You can start the outer line of the leg from the landmark or widen it a bit. Again, loosely check the widths of the thigh against the head height. Now triangulate to find the position of the other foot. Mark the position of the knees. It should be at the halfway point for the straight leg. And our grid is done. You can consider this a complete gesture drawing, but we'll clean up a tiny bit so it looks nice. Either use an eraser to lighten the grid line or create another layer to draw upon. Now we have most of the placements. The goal here is to add a little anatomical details and make perspective notes. In this case, I totally forgot to sketch in the breast beforehand. They're simple angle ellipses, and notice there's a nice connecting rhythm up top to help keep track of their symmetries. Clean up your outline, add bumps and curves where you see them, but again, stick to curves, S-curves, and straights. Humans are mostly curves. Try to insert some straight lines whenever you can to give a contrasting sense of structure. You can usually find opportunities to draw straight lines around bony areas. Unlike the torso, the limbs' anatomy tend to subtly stagger the masses to counterbalance each other. If you ignore this, you'll end up with a Michelin man. Think about the perspective of the different parts. In this case, they're mostly flat to our view. Nothing is coming dramatically in or out of the page. We can see that the rib cage is subtly tilted backwards and the pelvis forward, and the right thigh is coming towards us. The rest of the other parts are rather flat, but try to assign some perspective to them anyway for practice by drawing cylindrical wrapping lines as you see in these cylinders. In this next example, we'll be looking at a back pose, but I also picked this reference so we can practice estimating at landmarks and grid lines that we don't see. Start with a simple head. I have a ellipse and a triangle shape for the jaw. Sketch in the angle of the shoulder line. Mark the placements of the shoulder bumps, the highest points on the shoulders. These 2 points look rather convenient and symmetric across the shoulder. We're just trying to find convenient anchor points for a simple grid line. There's technically no wrong answers. Here I took a moment to jot down the overall feel of the gesture of the pose. Often this is the longest lines on the body. This pose shows mostly the back, but we're also seeing some of the profile view. So I'll also be using the profile silhouette line that ends with the pelvis bone. Looks like it's straight down from the ear, and using the visible part of the head with the clipped chin, looks like it's slightly more than 4 head counts. Next, we'll locate the tailbone or the top of the butt. Looks like it's straight down from the back of the head and 3.5 head down. Connect the back center line from behind the hair. And next, also connect the shoulder bumps to the tailbone. Now we'll connect to the hip lines. Her hands are conveniently right on top of the head of the thigh bone, so we'll use these as our landmark. Triangulate from the tailbone and shoulder points to get where they are. We can't really see the neck. We'll sort of guess at them and connect to the hips. Again, clean up the measurement lines as you go, lightly sketch in the rib and pelvis circles. Now we'll sketch in the arms. On the front, it starts slightly in front of the nose, and on the back, it's roughly below the cheekbone. Now connect them to where the hand conveniently rests on the hip. You can triangulate where the right elbow is and check the thickness against the head. But here I just used an estimation curve and construct the arm around it, noting that the right elbow is lower than the left. Connect the necessary lines to form the butt. Now we'll double the torso length to get to the ground. Err on the side of making your legs slightly longer. Triangulate to get the position of the feet and create simple curves to connect them. Again, check the width of the thighs against the height of the head. For cleanup, we'll go through and add subtle bumps and angles to flesh out our figure. Notice in this reference, the camera height is around the knee and looking upward at the model. That means if we're thinking about the figure in simple cylindrical shapes, we're looking at the bottom of most of the cylinders. Draw wrapping lines for each part. This is an important step to train ourselves to think about 3D shapes, even though it's a two-dimensional drawing. As perspective practices, I would often put in the rectangle representing the footprint and little spherical gizmos to represent the axis of rotation of the knees and elbows. That's it for now. I'm drawing the seated poses next. So let me know if you need clarification on any part of the process so I can add it into the next video. I'll also be uploading a bonus standing pose on my Gumroad if you want to support the channel. And lastly, I doubt anyone will make it this far, but if I can get 2 or 3 volunteers to send me their drawings, I can make a feedback video as well. Thanks for watching, like and sub.